It's often considered a kind of mystery why Adam Smith didn't write more clearly about the Industrial Revolution. Let's look at this one a little more closely. One striking fact is that there really is a lot of history in the Wealth of Nations, whether it's history of medieval times, history of the collapse following the Roman Empire, history of silver prices, history of the colonies, or history of the East India Company. But can we look in that book and actually see also a history of the Industrial Revolution? That's a lot less clear. It's definitely the case that Smith clearly saw the rise of consumer society, which in today's world looks a bit like this photo, but in mid-18th century. Great Britain was already well underway. It's perhaps when you look at Smith's discussions of the rise of towns and nobles spending their money on baubles and trinkets rather than supporting workers on the land that you can see this in Smith most clearly. So to the extent the Industrial Revolution was first and foremost a consumer revolution, as it's been stressed by such contemporary writers as McKendrick. Well, in that regard, Smith in a way did see the onset of the Industrial Revolution. He just didn't focus so much on all those machines. You don't get the sense, reading Smith, that he understood that the modern world would end up looking a bit like this, and that there could be discontinuous jumps in the command of humanity over, say, energy and material resources. Instead, Smith is still quite worried about the notion of keeping capital intact, as is reflected by his analysis of productive and unproductive labor. And he actually suggests it's agriculture which stands the greatest chance of keeping capital intact. Today, we will discuss the relationship between the fault lines and the Earth crust in earthquake. This dislocation of the rock occurs from the Earth's surface 7 kilometers to several hundred kilometers vertically down to the crust. The earthquake's focus is called epicenter, which is vertically located beneath the interior of the Earth crust, and the energy released transferred through the epicenter. The faults are fractures on the Earth crust. The position of the epicenter can be identified by the faults maps looking down from the center of the Earth. It will result in seismic waves which will decrease as you move away from the epicenter. Now we would like to look to recent survey conducted by Canadian researchers on diet. Total 31 women volunteered in the survey. They have been told to participate in the exercise program without changing their diet. After a careful observation, the researchers found that some volunteers experience body fat change after 6 months from the day they have started the experiment. The findings further stated that some lost significant amount fat, which leads to decrease in body mass. On the other hand, there were others who did not lose fat at all. The study concludes there must be two explanations. Those who did not lose weight must have eaten more, and another factor is it is because there's psychological reason not to believe in losing fat. Far too many people, often say things like animals do this but we don't, or else this animal does this and that animal does this, but the humans don't do things like that. Those statements have some hidden assumption that we are not animals. When we say animals do this, animals do that, we often assume that we're not animals. If we are not animals, what are we? Are we plants or trees or flowers? No, we are not. Then okay, we are not plants. Are we microorganisms, really tiny microscopic things? No, we are not. Then the natural conclusion must be we are not living things. That's not true. Yes, we are animals and I see animals in us and I see humans in animals. So, I'm going to talk about the animal behavior and human nature. In order to understand human nature, we can look into animals' eyes and animal behavior and find something about what made us who we are. Today I want to talk about water, and the law that surrounds drinking water, to talk about its quality, talk about what your rights are to clean water, to also give you a sense of what key threats are to drinking water, what your exposure might be, and what we might do about it, both legally but also personally. Water is a critical component of our environment and our bodies. Your body is close to 70% water. You can go for several weeks, 2 to 3 on average without food, you can only go for about 4 minutes without air, and you can go for maybe 4 or 5 days without water before you die. So water is absolutely critical, and one of the key arguments I want to make today is that it's a largely neglected area of environmental law, given the rapid increase in our knowledge about chemical threats to water quality and where those threats come from. The universe we know it is actually really old. Do you know exactly how old is the universe? The universe is about 50 billion years old, and it is discovered that the oldest star is about 30 billion years old, not older than the universe, which is perfectly matched. Well, people thought it might expanded 10 to 20 billion years ago. However, according to the theory of Big Bang, it actually happened 13.7 billion years ago. The Big Bang theory is also known as the cosmological model, is simply an amazing discovery. The expansion of the universe had really occurred 13.7 billion years ago, which can match the current prediction of the cosmological model. However, we're still not sure how many years more it will expand in the future is really unknown to us. In the United States, the government is discussing about epidemic transmitting. This is a worrying issue. The United States government is planning to use antiviral drugs to prevent the epidemic transmitting. This is only possible because the government of the United States have access to abundant resources. However, this is not the truth of the developing countries. It is more difficult for them to prevent epidemic transmitting because the government of the developing countries have to face the challenge of lower number resources. Now I like the history, and one thing I want to go over briefly is a history of epigenetic research, and this is from my perspective now. I got into this field in the early 90s, and what I have here is plotted publications, total publications, and function of time here, and on a linear graph. So what I did for this is I wanted to show that basically up until around the year 2000. There's an inflection point right around 2005 right in here where it looks like basically nothing really is happening much in the field of epigenetics. To the point where it's actually going vertical and a lot is happening in the field of epigenetics. Now if you plot this rather than on linear paper semi-log paper, what you will find is that what I'm showing is an exponential growth curve for publications in the field of epigenetics. And that in the scientific community, there's a doubling of the epigenetics papers every 1.5 to 2 years. Last year alone we put into publication summers between 15 and 20,000 papers, which took us 15 years from 1992 to 2005. Why the bumblebees pick some flowers over others? Researchers have known for a while that flowers' color can be a signal. Color in shorthand that says to a bee, hey, I get some good quality nectar here, want to stop by for a visit. But new findings show that bees also use color to get clues about a flower's temperature. And according to a study from a British research team published in the journal Nature, some like it hot. Bees use up a lot of energy just staying warm on some days. In fact, they can't even fly if they are too cold. So if one flower is warmer than another, a bee can save some of its fuel by basking on that flower while it's doing its pollinating business. And it turns out that bumblebees consistently do choose warmer flowers over cooler ones, even when the two flowers offer up the same quantity and quality of nectar. Some plants seem to be evolutionarily adapted to be slightly warmer because the warmer ones get visited more by the chilly bees. When it comes to getting pollinated, apparently the heat is on, and that is the buzz. This is a 40-watt light bulb. If you leave it on all the time, it uses 1 kilowatt every day. And it's possible to express all forms of power consumption using this unit of the light bulb. I started measuring everything around my house, around my office. And I found some surprising things. First, I plug in a phone charger. And it didn't even register on this power meter. It uses 1/100th of a light bulb of power. So I don't think the phone chargers can be our number one phone energy consumption. Just taking one hot bath every day uses the same energy, same power of 5 light bulbs on all the time, non-stop. And I found I've been steadily using 40 light bulbs worth of gas for heating, making hot air or hot water. And that surprises me. Transport is one of the biggest forms of energy consumption, and it uses about a third of our energy. If you drive an average car 50 kilometers a day, that corresponds to adding 40 light bulbs on all the time. Today, the average British person is using 125 light bulbs of power. That's 125 light bulbs on all the time, non-stop. That's huge.